I started reacting to every single plant that I was putting into my body. I was going into anaphylaxis due to having severe mast cell activation syndrome. The only thing I was not reacting to was meat. I remember going into anaphylaxis, shooting myself with EpiPens, going to the hospital. I started to feel so well because this diet was like my medicine. You know, eating steak rather than taking a supplement the steak was my supplement. The steak and the meat and the red meat was everything that my body needed. Even one of my clients got me this shirt that says, "Just a girl who loves sunshine and steak," because that was the missing link. Was I got the sunshine. I was always using the sunshine and movement and exercise, but the steak was the missing link.
All right. So I'm happy to bring to us today, we've got Angela, who's going to share a success story with us. Angela, you said you're down there in Los Angeles, California. How are you doing today?
I am in Los Angeles, and I am doing really well, Dr. Baker. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of your channel today.
Sure. I guess let's just get into this. You've got some sort of success, I understand, and I'm not sure what it is, and so I'm happy to hear about this. So I guess maybe start wherever you want to start. Maybe there's some background information you'd like to provide, maybe who you are, what you do, how you grew up, or whatever you want to share.
So I actually grew up in rural Pennsylvania in the Northeast, and my whole life I suffered from chronic, mysterious health issues that nobody could actually figure out. Fast forward to the time I was 28 and I was living in Los Angeles. I actually moved to LA 20 years ago in 2003, almost 21 years ago, actually. And even though I got slightly better while living in Los Angeles, I actually worked in the fashion industry for 10 years, and it was a very high stressful job. And it was during that time that I actually got really ill and with more mysterious health issues. But this time, my health went from being like I was always able to be functional, even though I was chronically ill. But this time I went to not being functional at all. And in fact, when I was 28, I got diagnosed with breast cancer. And I'm 39 now, so that was 11 years ago. And that was my first real major health crisis. And it was during that time that my doctors advised me to go plant-based. And even though I listened to my doctors, I wasn't really getting any better. And in fact, I started developing a lot of histamine issues. And I did a lot of work, like self-healing work, that helped me get to the other side of that, but I never actually felt well. And my doctors just wanted to categorize my symptoms as post-cancer syndrome. So they just put it under this huge umbrella. Fast forward about 5 years later, and I had to have an emergency surgery. My top rib, I found out I had thoracic outlet syndrome, and my top rib was compressing my brachial plexus nerve and my subclavian artery with my clavicle. And so once I got that, I had to get that rib removed to release the pressure. And after that surgery, everything that I worked so hard to get into a slight remission came back with vengeance. And I just continued to get sicker and sicker. And mind you, at this time, I also went from working in the fashion industry to the holistic health industry. And I actually started my practice nearly 10 years ago after cancer, helping people reconnecting their mind, body, and spirit so that they can achieve total wellness. The only thing that I didn't really put into my practice was I didn't really focus on diet because I was still trying to figure out my own diet that I didn't want to be responsible telling people to do plant-based or paleo or Whole30. I was not in that place to be able to feel responsible to guiding people in their health when I was still figuring out my own on a nutritional sense. Like I got the nervous system, the spirit, the body in terms of movement and exercise, but I wasn't really focusing much on nutrition. However, when I got severely ill after this surgery, my histamine issues were so severe that I started reacting to every single plant that I was putting into my body, every vegetable, every fruit, every starch. I was going into anaphylaxis due to having severe mast cell activation syndrome. The only thing I was not reacting to was meat. And being this plant-based or plant-focused, because I was never like 100% vegan. But I definitely ate 90% vegetables, 10% meat. And I remember going into anaphylaxis, shooting myself with EpiPens, going to the hospital, getting the ambulance called several times. And of course, once again, because I had that surgery, my neurologist and gastro doctors were saying, oh, you have autonomic dysfunction and this can happen. I also was fainting over 15 times a day. And my neurologist was like, you're just going to have to manage this for the rest of your life. And I just remember looking at him in the eye and saying, if I have to manage this for the rest of my life, that's going to be in about 3 months, because I could truly feel in my heart I was dying. So I decided that I actually didn't really have a decision. I was so frantic because no doctors in Los Angeles were able to help me. They just wanted to tell me that it was either in my head, or that even though they did several tests showing that I had autonomic dysfunction. For example, I failed my tilt table test, where they just hook you up to a table and you stand up for 10 minutes and you pass out. And I passed out. And so I took a leap of faith, and I just, on a whim, I was like, I need to go and get answers because I'm not getting them here. And I just felt like if I didn't, I was just going to die very soon. So I packed up my stuff. I was so grateful I found somebody to rent out my home in LA, and I went home to where I grew up in Pennsylvania. And within 1 day of being there, I went into anaphylaxis because I had just made my mom and I it was New Year's Day, and I made some sort of vegetable dish, and I went into anaphylaxis once again because I didn't know what it was. It was like I was reacting to everything, as you do with having mast cell issues, and they were not under control. I had just happened to have a friend who used to be my neighbor call and check in while I was having that reaction. And he called my mom and asked if I had ever been checked for Lyme disease. And all I could think of was, how could this be Lyme disease? And I've been in Los Angeles. The only time I really associated with Lyme disease was when I grew up there. I didn't really know much about it. I didn't know anything about coinfections. I didn't know anything about mold toxicity. However, I was living in a water-damaged home before I actually moved out of LA. It wasn't until I finally got that taken care of that I ended up going and getting tested, and then that came back positive for everything: Lyme, co-infections, Babesia, Bartonella. And that's how I also found out that I had severe mold toxicity, and that I was also diagnosed with something called CIRS, which is chronic inflammatory response syndrome. So that's how I got led to the carnivore community, not because I actually knew of that there was even a community. This was also 3.5 years ago. So all of this started, the surgery was 2019, and I didn't get diagnosed with Lyme until February 2021. And that's actually how I started my journey. And I could think about was, how can I just eat meat? I'm not going to thrive. I'm not going to survive. And that actually led me to some people that were sharing their stories that there was actually a whole carnivore community. And I just remember being like, what? And then they led me to your book and I read your book and I was just baffled about everything that you wrote in this book about how the toxins in plants and what they do to our body. And I was just shocked because here I was thinking I was doing myself good by eating all these plants. And in fact, I was just killing myself more and more each day.
Okay. But it's interesting because you said you got all these mysterious symptoms and disorders and physicians can't figure. That's pretty common. They call it it's idiopathic. We don't know why this is going on. And it's just maybe if I wasn't poisoning myself with food every day.
Yeah.
No, but we don't think about that because we're not trained to look into that and think about that as physicians. I can tell you for sure that certainly not in my profession, in my specialty, we've never thought about that. And the vast majority of physicians are still that way for sure, as you probably know. Yeah, it's interesting because today we're in 2024 and there's a lot more people talking about this carnivore diet. I've been talking about it for almost a decade now, getting close to that. And back then you were really weird, you're still considered weird, but it was way out there back then. And now we're seeing, only because it's worked for so many people, that it's gone on. So you made this decision to go carnivore at some point. Tell me about that. Obviously you have this, a bit of a leap of faith because you've got all this conditioning that, hey, I need to get fiber. What about all the vegetables that I'm supposed to eat that are keeping me healthy? How did you mentally cope with that? And then tell me about how you started.
So as I really meditated on this because part of my identity was cooking. I loved to cook and I would every meal was always like a full meal and I remember standing over the stove and just always making some sort of dish from scratch. And I just remember when I got really sick, I got down to 89 pounds. And the doctors...
How tall are you?
I'm 5'2".
How tall are you, just for reference?
5'2".
Okay. So that's still pretty darn dead.
Yeah. I had lost all my muscle. The Lyme had just destroyed my collagen and muscle tissue. And it didn't really matter what I ate. I was, at that point, when I was 89 pounds, I was stuffing myself with rice and chicken and vegetables and gluten-free vegan donuts, whatever. That's because my doctors were just like, eat whatever and ever you can to get the calories. And it didn't really matter what I was eating because I was so sick. The bugs were just eating it. And I felt like I was just being eaten alive every single day. But the fatigue was so severe while I had this infection. And it was really just a matter of my doctors telling me that they were going to put me on TPN or a feeding tube. And I refused and I said, I'm going to do this carnivore diet a try because the fact that I know what's in these formulas and it's just a bunch of sugar and corn syrup and all of these different chemicals that our body should not even be consuming. And I refused. And at the same time, I felt really grateful because I just remember having this moment in my meditation just saying, is this a diet that I could do? Can I sustain this? And I remember just hearing this voice in my head saying, you have no energy to even chop vegetables. You have no energy to do really anything. This diet is not only going to heal you nutritionally, but energetically, it's going to save your life because you don't have to worry about much. I mean, you putting a steak on a pan versus chopping up vegetables and having 10 different cutting boards and all these different kitchen supplies that you've got to clean versus putting a steak in a pan and eating it on a plate. I have 2, maybe 3 dishes tops.
Yeah, there's no doubt. It's infinitely easier to just cook steak. I laugh because I spend about 3 to 4 minutes a day on meal prep. It includes cooking, and I eat pretty fast too. So I don't spend a lot of time eating. That's a very small part of my day. Whereas before, when you're eating 3, maybe 4, 5 times a day with the various snacks, you're spending a lot of time and effort planning, cooking, cleaning, thinking about food. And you do it. Most people spend or engage in several hours a day in
Yes.
food. It just is. And not just doing it, but often thinking about it. And I don't really think much about food. It's weird. I talk about food all day, about nutrition, but I don't personally think about my own nutrition that much. It's just, I'm going to have that and it's done. It's very
Absolutely.
easy. So, anyway.
It really makes such a difference when you don't have to sit and worry about what you're going to eat, what food you're going to put together, the ingredients. It's just, my life feels so much less stressful now.
And stress is another thing. I mean, stress exacerbates disease, as you probably know. And so when you're anxious and stressed out about stuff, it flares up things. Stress has a huge impact on heart disease. Stress is a big driver of that. So you decide you're going to make the switch. You read my book. You probably watched some podcasts, or who knows how you got there to make that decision. How did it go initially? How did your body respond to when you went carnivore for the first time?
I just remember it was the first time I ate just a steak, nothing else. I remember I had this, rather than flood of a histamine reaction, I had this flood of euphoria. I felt so good in my body. I felt like my brain turned on. It was as if every single cell in my body got activated. And for the first time, I just remember feeling so clear and so full of life and energy that I wanted to do it again the next day. And I just kept going. It was a bit of a transition because I still had it in my head that I needed to have I only had 2 vegetables that I could actually process. So it took me a while to get rid of those. It was Brussels sprouts and cabbage. Were like the 2 that it took me a little while to kick those, but that was like a gradual thing. Yeah, it was the one thing that was like, oh, I still can eat this, or I can still eat the cabbage. But I knew that I didn't need it. It wasn't like I needed it. It was just more of a creature. It was just being a creature of habit and something that I felt like I could hold on to as long as I could. And then as I continued to make that transition, it was like I would do 1 whole day, then 2 whole days, 3 whole days. I gradually got up to there where I was just 100% carnivore. And I just remember it was like slowly my life started coming back. The biggest thing I noticed was I wasn't fainting anymore. I wasn't going into anaphylaxis anymore. I no longer had to use my EpiPen several times a week. And so the better I started to feel, the more I wanted to stay on track. Because the other thing was my Lyme literate doctor, once we found out that it was Lyme and the coinfections, he looked at me and he's like, you are my sickest patient. And because you are so reactive right now and your mast cells are not under control, I cannot treat you. So you're going to have to get a little healthier before I even give you an antibiotic or a herb. Because if I do, you could probably die. So he was saying that, and I was telling him that I just started this carnivore diet. He was like one of the first doctors that actually knew about your diet and said, I don't care what it is, you just need to get healthier. And that diet sounds great because with Lyme, you can't really have sugar, grains. Those are the 2 things that will really activate and keep the Lyme from going into remission, is any type of sugar or grain. So I focused on the diet, and then I started focusing on detoxing. But the diet was so beneficial in helping me detox. And that was the other thing, was I had in my head I needed fiber to detox. And I suffered because of the Lyme. I had severe gastroparesis, which basically is my digestive system from having a damaged vagus nerve and having all these neurological issues. My motility was very slow. So once again, I'm over here thinking I needed more fiber to help my body go, but I was only getting worse, and I was always constantly chronically bloated. And once I started the carnivore diet, it was like I was able to go to the bathroom every single day, and my body actually was starting to able to detox, especially because this infection, the spirochetes, don't feed off of protein and fat. So I initially went through a major detox, a lot of die-off. And that is why I started to feel so well, because this diet was like my medicine. Eating steak rather than taking a supplement was, the steak was my supplement. The steak and the meat and the red meat was everything that my body needed. It needed all the vitamins, it needed all the minerals, the things that I didn't even know that it had until I actually started researching and learning. And that's how I started to get my health back. And that's actually what got me to a healthy place where I could actually start treating the Lyme and getting the infection under control. But my symptoms were under control before I actually started doing any treatments.
That's interesting. So where are you at today? As far as you've been doing this, you said about three and a half years or something like that. So 3.5 years into it, are you pretty
I am. Actually, I still work with my CIRS doctor. So I switched doctors about a year ago. Once I treated the Lyme, I started working with a doctor that helps with chronic inflammatory response, because I found out that the mold issue were even worse than the Lyme. So I was working with her on a rigorous detox. However, she's a very big supporter of the Lyme diet. And that's basically what I've been on for 3.5 years. That's the version of the carnivore diet that I've had the most success with, is just ruminant meat, salt and water. And my inflammatory markers were so low. And I remember when I first met her, she was like, I don't know what you're doing, but you are not my sickest patient. And she, like I said, she's a big fan of the Lyme diet. And she was like, I know that because you're not my sickest patient because of your diet that you're on. And I actually just met with her about a month ago, and your inflammatory markers just continue to improve. And that's my TGF beta 1, C4A, and C3A. They are all in normal range. I truly believe that this diet is what's been the 95% of my healing. I contribute to this diet and to this way of eating.
Now, you said you'd gotten down to 89 pounds. Have you been able to, and lost a bunch of muscle when you were on like the sort of the plant-based diet and really sick? Have you been able to restore some of that?
Yeah, so I'm actually at 105 pounds now. And
okay, yeah, so that's 15 pounds of probably mostly muscle.
Yeah, it is. It is. And the other thing was, I was bedbound. Like I was telling you, I was fainting 15 times a day. So when I got down to 89 pounds, I was living in a bed for the most part. And now that I'm able to have more of an active lifestyle, so I walk, I hike, I do yoga, I travel, I'm getting my life back and getting that vitality back that I lost. And not only am I able to thrive, but the beautiful thing is that I've been using this way of eating to pay it forward in my own holistic healing practice. And that was the missing piece, not only for myself, but for a lot of my clients. So the majority of my clients are on an animal-based carnivore diet, and they are thriving as well.
Yeah, there's the reason, because a lot of people, it's just this fad diet, it'll go up. But the reality is it works very well for many, not necessarily every single person, but for so many people that I think it's going to continue to grow in popularity and so on and so forth. I don't know what your sort of personal situation is, but friends, family, people around you, obviously they probably would have noticed the change, I assume, unless you were completely isolated. If so, what has been the response to that? And do they think this all meat diet is bad for you, even though it made you healthy?
The interesting thing, so family-wise, my family was so scared of losing me. They all saw me on my deathbed, really. Like I said, when I went home to Pennsylvania, I really thought in my heart I was going home to go home. I just wanted to die in my bed every single day because I didn't know if I was going to see the next. It was a really scary time. So when I said I was going to start this diet, I mean, they were just happy to see me eat something that I wasn't going to react to. So they were very supportive. And my closest friends also were very supportive. A lot of them were like, I brought you meat. What kind of meat can I bring you? But it was more so people that associated with me that maybe they weren't my closest friends, but people that didn't really know me but knew of me that started seeing me do this meat diet that I would get a lot of flack. I guess in better word, judgment. I would get people saying to me, oh, we hope that your life expectancy doesn't decrease because of this diet, or it's just, you're going to die from a heart attack from all that cholesterol you're eating. Things like that I would hear rumors behind my back about people talking about me as I was living in Pennsylvania during my treatments. And so small towns talk a lot, and I would hear gossip through the grapevine, as you do. So it was something that I didn't really care, though. I didn't take the criticism and the judgments to heart, because I knew in my heart of hearts that this diet was helping me heal. And I was really grateful because even though being in Los Angeles, LA is a vegan capital, but I'm so grateful that my friends here are so supportive of my diet, and all of them, including my family. The one thing that nobody can take away from me is what I looked like before versus what I look like now. And the transformation is very obvious, not just within my physique, but within my energy levels, my cognitive functions, everything. My life is being restored and renewed every day. And they're all, eat the meat. I don't care. Eat the meat. Eat the meat. And we go out to, there's a lot of really great Korean barbecue places out here that you can go to that just serve meat with no marinades, just plain. And then I just bring my Redmond's salt. There's a lot of really wonderful steak restaurants here. There's a lot of really amazing Brazilian places here. So even though LA is a vegan capital, we sure do have a lot of great places to eat.
When you say vegan capital, that means instead of 1% of the population, it's like 3%. It's still such a minority. Yeah. And as you may know, there was a very famous vegan restaurant called Sage.
That was my favorite restaurant. Like and I'm actually love Molly. Yeah. She's an amazing person. Personally, I'd known her because I used to go when I was vegan, plant-based. I was in that restaurant once or twice a week. I don't live very far from it.
Yeah, I know she's made a transition to regeneratively agriculture and is getting a lot of just hatred from the vegan community. They're out there picketing and boycotting and screaming. And I think I'm going to interview Molly here in sometime. I think she's on our schedule. Oh, good,
because I was hoping that you were, because I was going to say I'll go to her restaurant and personally talk to her about you.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, it amazes me for people that claim they're ethically vegan because they're so compassionate, how much hatred they can have at the same time towards human beings.
Absolutely.
And it's such a ironic, contrasting type of thing. But yeah, I've been all over the place. I've been to LA many times and I've never had trouble finding a steak or a steak restaurant. I've been to the Fogage Chow and was it Beverly Hills and all the various, it's still there. The reality is the vast majority of people eat meat and still enjoy it and still eat the heck out of it, which is, I think, good. Unfortunately, we tend to couple that with all the garbage. And that's what's really the problem there is all the garbage we eat that, we sort of misinterpret. And there's no dearth of poorly done studies where they conflate eating at McDonald's to what I or you might do, where we just eat without the junk food, which is so incredibly different than these other diets that they seem to conflate. As far as, obviously, you're dealing with this Lyme disease, all the co-infections, the autonomic issues, I'm wondering, because it sounds like you had this brachial plexopathy. I don't know if your arm went numb or you lost strength in the arm. I'm just wondering if diet could have been useful in that situation because a lot of people say there's a prominent cervical rib and they do a first rib resection. Typically, it's how they often treat that. As an orthopedic surgeon, I run into that issue occasionally. That wasn't in my purview because I didn't operate in that particular location around the neck, but that was always on the differential. And I always was a little skeptical about it because I was like, these people have had this their whole life and now they're symptomatic. The rib didn't grow suddenly when they were 30. It was like, it's been there the whole time. So something else has happened in addition to just that. And we just say maybe it's just inflammation in that root of the nerve root of collection, or what we call a brachial plexus. Do you think about that ever?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question because it's something that I thought about so much once I got into this diet. And then once I actually learned about Lyme disease and the inflammation that it caused, because I found out when I got diagnosed with the Lyme, I found out that I had it over 30 years based on my health history. Yes, absolutely. I think that especially with all the inflammation that I had in my body and like living in a water damaged home and from the mold and the co-infections, I completely think that if I would have been eating the right diet, like the proper human diet, that I was eating this way, I would have reserved myself a lot of pain and suffering. And I wish I never got that surgery. I really do. Because that surgery just really unlocked everything. And then I learned that the breast cancer that I had at 28 was also a symptom of having Lyme as well. I just think about just my lifestyle over the last, like I said, I'm 39, but when I started really getting sick at 28, and I think about how I lived for 28 years, it's no wonder why I was constantly in an inflammatory flare-up. I drank alcohol, I ate processed foods, I ate sugar. It was a standard American diet. Even if I wanted to be healthy and plant-based, even though I did the plant-based diet the right way, I wasn't eating a lot of processed foods when I started to become more vegan and plant-based, but I was still eating foods that were causing inflammation.
Yeah. How about mentally? Because we talk a lot about the physical thing, but our mental health, our cognition, our mood, any changes with that you noticed?
Absolutely. One of the things that I suffered severely from, and this was something that was really, this is when I really knew that something was wrong. And when I started thinking about dying and just feeling really close to death when I was so sick. And I definitely suffered from anxiety and stress and depression while I was going through this. And there were days where I just couldn't even get out of bed, or that I thought I was not going to be able to survive this infection. And I just remember what was one of the first things that started to really shift for me was this girl that everybody knew as being so positive. And I was always that positive girl, the light that when I would walk into the room, I would light up the room. And now it was like, I just wanted to be in the dark. It was like a true dark night of the soul. And the only person that can get you out of that darkness is yourself. You could have all the support around you, but but nobody's you. And even though I had that support, I felt so alone and isolated and scared and full of fear. And it was so scary because that's not who I am. And as I was cleaning up my diet and letting go of these toxins and these foods and continuing on my carnivore journey, I remember there was something that I think I was like watching TV, and I just remember I cracked up laughing. And I couldn't remember the last time I actually found anything funny. Nothing was, somebody would say something and I would just, nothing. I was so apathetic. I had no emotions. It just was just a shell of myself. And I noticed once I started to get my mental health back as I was eating more and more red meat, because I was eating chicken for a brief moment, but that didn't really do anything for me. And I also gave up pork because it was the same thing. I wasn't really having very a lot of benefits from eating either of those things. So that's why I just stuck with beef, lamb, goat, and venison. And that's when I really started to notice the shift and making sure that I was getting enough fat. I wasn't really able to eat a lot of fat in the beginning, but as my body adapted, I was able to get up to a decent amount of fat. And that was really like the big game changer, was getting more fat, eating more, and then getting all of these nutrients that just really helped with my brain and cognitive function, especially when I started eating more lamb, because lamb is high in DHA, which is also really great for your brain.
When you were going through your health struggles and you suggest maybe plant-based diet or something else, was there a point where you tried to dial in the other factors, sleep, exercise, sunlight exposure? Because a lot of those things can be important in addition to diet. Had you done that prior to switching diet?
Something that I learned back when I had cancer is it's not just the food that we eat that we get energy from. It's everything around us. It's our environment. Movement is medicine. Sunlight is medicine. Grounding on the earth is medicine. Meditation is medicine. So these were all things that I was already doing before I had gotten so sick. And it was actually something that I incorporated in my holistic health practice. This was something that not only did I do myself, but this was something that I always had my clients do as well. And even one of my clients got me this shirt that says, "Just a girl who loves sunshine and steak," because that was the missing link. Was I got the sunshine. I was always using the sunshine and movement and exercise, but the steak was the missing link. So I got the shirt that says, "Just a girl who loves sunshine and steak," because that is, to me, was my two biggest healers are circadian rhythms, sunlight, sunrise, sunset. They're non-negotiable. And of course, red meat, but exercise, walking. Even when I was bedbound, so I got one of these little bikes. They're called kubies, and I'd sit on my bed or a chair and just pedal my feet. And then I would use 2-pound weights to keep my body going. So even when I was bedbound, I still found ways of moving my body.
Yeah, I think all these, and as anybody knows, I'm a huge proponent of exercise and getting good sleep and aligning ourselves with circadian biology. I think those things are very important. But I think if you're still continuing to poison yourself with what you put in your mouth every day, either eating a bunch of processed garbage or something else that your body doesn't tolerate, well, I just don't think those things are going to be effective. I think you've got to dial in your nutrition. And if you don't, it's like not sleeping. Can you imagine? I don't care what you're doing. If you just did not sleep, I don't care. You could exercise, you could eat well, you would be sick. You would really struggle with that. And I think nutrition's similar to that in the fact that we have to have the right nutrition for anything else to be effective. And so I think those are foundation. And no one goes without sleep, not long term. No one healthy goes without sleep. I can tell you that. So like I said, it's foundational. And so good for you for doing that. So tell me, so you went from being bedbound, thinking you're going to die within a few months, or even, I don't even know, thinking that maybe being dead would be a better position. So I know I've heard people say that they would sometimes rather be dead, to now, obviously, it sounds like you're thriving. It sounds like you've got no desire or concern about dying in the near future. It sounds like you've got your whole life ahead of you. What's on the horizon for you? What do you look to do, and what are you excited about?
So a couple things. I am actually starting in September. I am traveling solo to the UK. And I've actually just booked a one-way ticket. So I'm going to be starting in Scotland, and I'm going to be traveling around Scotland, England, Amsterdam, Ireland, maybe Paris. So that's something that I've always wished I could do. But because of having all of my chronic health issues, I was always afraid to do it. And so this is such a big journey for me to be able to do this. And also, the other major thing is I've had my holistic health practice for nearly 10 years. And after going through this journey, and while going through this journey, even though I was really sick, I still worked, and I still did work with my clients, but over the last 6 months, my practice has went through a major expansion. So I've been working through telehealth with my clients. I work with people globally all over the world. So if I can live in Los Angeles, and like I've been living bi-coastally for the last couple of years, and now I'm back in Los Angeles. So this is a big deal. I just moved back on Friday, officially back here. And so it's like I'm home, officially like home, other than going and traveling in the fall, but I'm home for the summer. And so I'm just grateful that I can work with people, I can help people. That's my mission. My mission is to turn my pain into purpose and help people go from being chronically ill to mindfully well. And I just want to keep expanding and growing that part of my practice. And I've been really focusing on the autoimmune, Lyme, coinfections, and chronic illness community now. That's where my practice mainly is focusing on. Because if I had to go through this, I don't want anybody else to have to go through this and suffer as long as I have. So I'm turning my mission into movement right now.
When you said you had obviously Lyme, Borrelia burgdorferi, and babesiosis, and some of these other, I guess you detected them in your serum or someplace. Are those now normalized, or where are you at with that in the last time you checked on those things?
So my body's immune system was not working at all. And based on labs, my immune system has turned back on, and I am in remission.
So no detectable levels of these pathogens.
So it's interesting because I actually when we went to that retreat, Meat Stock, and I ended up getting COVID. So that, of course, COVID made me flare up. But so that did take my Lyme, and not the co-infections, but the Lyme did flare up. However, even though I always get a blood test for it, my doctor said to me, even though it did flare up and it did come out of remission, your body's not recognizing it because your immune system is turned on. So with that said, when your immune system gets turned on, it means that my body is naturally fighting it, because with chronic Lyme, it can come out. And so we measure remission is based on how you feel versus what a blood test says. And given that, I wouldn't have even noticed that I was out of remission, but we all knew that COVID can potentially do that. Doesn't matter. It can activate it, but wasn't really concerned about it because I feel great.
We think about our immune system. I'm literally inhaling millions and billions of viral and bacterial particles right now. My body is dealing with that at all times, and our immune system wonderfully, thankfully, deals with it continuously. So anytime we are compromised through concomitant illness or whatever, injury or stress or whatever, lack of sleep, then you lose some efficacy of the immune system. And yeah, it makes sense that maybe a lot of people chronically are exposed to Lyme, but because their immune system works, they just deal with it. They don't have it. And again, you mentioned symptoms. And I think there's a lot of things that people, because we live in an age where you can get a blood test for anything these days, and not just a blood test, an everything test. We can test everything ad nauseum, ad infinitum. And it's, what do you actually care about at the end of the day? If you would have never if you felt good your whole life and never taken a test, and you had some Lyme titers and you never noticed it and you were just totally happy and healthy, you wouldn't care, honestly. It's what drives you, and it's the symptoms. And so I tell people really to focus on your symptoms more than individual tests, because you literally, I guarantee I can test anybody on the planet, and I can find a test where they can find something that's going to be abnormal. I don't care if it's an MRI. I don't know if I MRI'd my body, I would find all kinds of jacked up things. It's just part of life in many ways. And so your doctors, I guess it wasn't that your doctors were receptive to carnivore. You found the doctors that were already receptive to that, I think is what it sounds like. And fortunately, more and more of them are starting to realize that this is a significant part of the puzzle in many cases. And we often see them in the alternative space, the functional space, integrative space, the sort of the non-traditional physicians. You go to Kaiser Permanente in California, and they're all like indoctrinated into this is the way you practice medicine. If you don't practice medicine this way, you don't get as many brownie points, and maybe it will kind of mark you down or something like that. And it's interesting to see how medicine's going. And I've got this company, Revero, where we certainly put front and center the nutrition side of things and the lifestyle side of things. And then still, if we need the other stuff, we'll utilize it when it's necessary. But I think so many physicians just have they're not trained. They don't have the resource. That's the problem, is they don't have the resources. It's manyfold. They're not trained to do it. They're not incentivized to do it. They don't have the resources to do it. And so we've had to build that from scratch to have, because it takes a lot. I mean, your condition, your treatment was not easily treatable in a 15-minute visit once every 3 months. It doesn't lend itself to that. It needs the work you did just yourself, probably unguided in many ways, just doing your own research, which a lot of people criticize. I did my own research. I ended up in a graveyard. But realistically, some of this stuff takes a lot of effort and time. And kudos for you for doing that. Because like I said, had you just stayed in the allopathic Kaiser Permanente system, you probably would have been dead, perhaps, or on your way, or still bedbound. And that's what happens. You get bedbound, and then all of a sudden you get these sacral-decubiti ulcers, and then you got infections, and then you die of sepsis. And so I'm glad you're not there. That's good to hear. It's good to see, because you got a lot to offer the world, and I can tell you're just looking at you, look healthy and happy, and that's gotta feel good.
Yeah, no,
Correct.
Thank you so much. It's very true. It's the Western medicine failed me over and over again. And I think that there's a place for Western medicine in terms of trauma, or if I break my leg, great. If when I was having those anaphylactic reactions, that was great. They were able to get me back. But they're not great for helping you not to have those. They're great at putting Band-Aids on things, but they're not great at helping you manage your health and your lifestyle and helping you achieve wellness and manage a chronic illness without giving you 15 different prescriptions. Everything's a pill. There's a pill for everything these days. And I just refuse to live like that.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you finding out. Angela, we're about out of time here. Tell us, do you have a social media or a website or anything like that? Where do people go to find?
Yeah, I do. I have 2 Instagram accounts. One is my personal journey. It's Anglerro, Anglerro28. Or you can also follow me on Meatbasedmedium. It's my second Instagram account that's more focused, where I'm focusing more on my carnivore journey, and more. It also talks more about my practice. And I actually just started a new Instagram account for all of the restaurants that I eat at and for my travels, and it's called Ange Meats World. Ange Meat, like MEATS World. So I'm going to be utilizing that as part of my traveling journey, and where I will be documenting a lot of great steak restaurants, because I know that when we are suffering from any type of autoimmune issues, or whether we're just trying to avoid seed oils, it's going to be a page where you can see different restaurants around the country that I've personally experienced, that I've had these conversations about cooking preparations, what they make their steaks in, cross-contamination, and then, of course, if it was a quality meal or not.
Very good. Awesome. Angela, continued success. I hope you get lots of success with what you do. And thanks for sharing your story. Hopefully I'm sure it will inspire many more people, because it just does. It's inspiring to see. So thanks for doing what you do. And I'm sure we'll meet again at some point.
Absolutely.
So
thank you so much, Dr. Baker. I really appreciate you today. And thank you so much for all you're doing in this community, and for all of the support you and inspiration you give us on a daily basis. You've really helped save so many of our lives, and we wouldn't be here today without you. So thank you.